Okay, call the roll.
Camera.
Here, got it.
Bob Bauman,
Here.
Mr. Gerard Randall Jr., Mr. Grady Crosby,
Here.
Ms. Liz Sumner,
Here.
Mayor Dennis McBride.
Here.
Got a quorum.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us here today. I just want to say thank you to all the committee members. I appreciate the work you have already put in to prepare for today's meeting and for your willingness to maintain an open mind as we review the highest and best use evaluation from Hunden Partners. The purpose of the highest and best use evaluation is to provide facts and analysis, not predetermined outcomes of the needs of our city as a driver of growth of the local and state economies. The study was conducted by an independent third party with inputs from various private and public sector stakeholders to help ensure objectivity. During today's meeting, we will hear from two key members of the team that worked on the study at Hunden Partners, and then we will have the opportunity to ask them questions pertaining to the work and the results. Before we dive into the presentation, I have a few things I would like to cover that I hope will help guide the work we do today and in subsequent meetings. I think it is important for us to understand exactly what we are charged with and to use that as a guiding principle in our work. The special committee was formed to conduct a comprehensive review of the evaluation's findings and to provide informed recommendations to the board. The committee's role is to ensure any future decisions are thoughtful, data-driven, and grounded in responsible governance. Our work will take place during the course of several months to help ensure thoughtful and objective analysis and to fully understand the implications of any development before making recommendations. Our responsibility is to lay the groundwork. We are reviewing options, not making commitments. Our purpose, our charter as a committee is to provide recommendations to the full Wisconsin Center District Board based on 4 primary questions. Does Milwaukee need to pursue a convention center hotel? Where should it be located? Is the Wisconsin Center District the catalyst for getting a convention center hotel sited, financed, and built? And is there a different or better catalyst? So now that we have our North Stars, what we're here to accomplish, I'd like us all to stay mindful of how we do this work. First and foremost, it is the expectation of this committee that we remain respectful of one another and our guests throughout our discussion. Let's remain professional and extend courtesy at all times. Second, let's stay focused so we can accomplish what's ahead of us, what we're charged with. And by that, I mean we adhere to the questions of our committee charter. When we veer off course and move away from what we need to accomplish, I encourage us to respectfully and professionally remind our colleagues to come back to the 4 primary questions posed to us. And finally, as a part of that focus, please stay mindful of the clock. We have a lot of ground to cover. Please watch your time when you're offering your thoughts, asking questions, and providing answers so that we are all ensured fair time and consideration. Again, I want to thank all of you for your thoughtful participation today. And with that, I'd like to welcome Steve and Matt from Hunden Partners to present their work on the highest and best use evaluation. And I would like to ask that we allow them to complete their presentation before asking questions.
Sure, just one thing, and this is an apology in advance. I have a meeting at 10 o'clock also downtown that I can't avoid. It's only going to last about a half hour. I'll have to leave at about 9:45, but if this is still going, I'll come back. Just want to apologize for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen.
All right, so why don't I'll go ahead and start. We'll first start by just providing a brief overview of Hunden Partners, and then I'll do a little bit of an introduction of myself and let Matt introduce himself. So Hunden Partners is a 20-year-old firm. We've been working in the real estate advisory space for the entirety of that 20 years. The firm works at the intersection of tourism development, economic development, and real estate development. We've worked on about 1,000 studies over the course of the firm's history. About 600 of those, more than that, have been focused on convention centers, meeting facilities, and the related hotels to them. And so our work sort of spans, tourism development activities, kinds of work that we've done for you all, and then we also work with clients to help implement projects. A little bit of background on me. So I'm Steve Hammerly, Executive Vice President. I head up our Development Advisory Service practice. I've been with Hunden for a little under 3 years. I've spent the vast majority of my career on the side of projects, responsible for developing some fairly impactful projects from the public, private, not-for-profit sectors. I, at one point in time, headed up development at McCormick Place. And so I, understand well where you all are sitting. Prior to joining Hunden Partners, I was running the redevelopment of Navy Pier, so putting in place the long-term strategy, then effectively implementing that over about a 10-year period. And that's when I joined Hunden, and I had worked with Hunden Partners as part of that process and had hired them. So I'm a former client. So the perspective I bring, I sit in your shoes. I know what it's like, and I also understand all of the trade-offs that need to be made when you make decisions about developing real estate. It's not black and white. There are a lot of business trade-offs that need to be made. And so I think an important reason why we're here is to lay out that information. Matt, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Steve. So I'm Matthew Abel. I'm a director with Hunden. Been with the firm nearly 6 years now. I have a finance and real estate background and was really the day-to-day project manager for the study.
So let me just talk a little bit, and you all had talked about sort of the highest and best use analysis that we undertook. I think what's important to understand is in the context of the Wisconsin Center District, one of the things in the lens through which we looked at this was the purpose and mission of the district, because really that's what it's about. This is not really about real estate and land value. It's really looking at the sort of public and business purpose of the district. And so we looked at its assets, and it's really about how best to fulfill the district's mission and purpose. And that was the lens through which we looked at everything. Part of what we wanted to look at was maximizing the value of the district in Milwaukee. And so again, that's just more than just land value. And it's also about realizing the full return on the investment in the Baird Center. So we looked at all of the assets together, and that's the lens through which we looked at things. Matt, I'll turn it over to you to just kind of walk through the key questions that we looked at in the study, and Matt will sort of walk you through our findings, and then we'll talk toward the end about some of the conclusions we've reached and some of the sort of decision points you all are at. I think one of the things, though, that is important to remember is our role in the purpose of this report is to provide information and guidance to the district to help inform long-term strategic planning. So it's not about a project, it's not about making a decision about a particular project, but it's really about guiding long-term strategy and how all that may unfold. So again, it's an important tool to help you all talk through the important sort of goals and objectives of the district and how your real estate assets may or may not play into that.
So to cover some of the guiding questions of the study process, we started with the current site and neighborhood assessment, which we'll talk a little bit more. But to Steve's point, understanding the assets that the district has today, but also surrounding in terms of the broader neighborhood, the Deer District, which has become so successful, and different dynamics there. From that perspective, we then went into our detailed market analysis section, which looked at the retail market, the office market, hospitality, as well as other use types that could be within the neighborhood that would create a great atmosphere for the city. From there, we developed some of the high-level opportunities that we felt would best serve the broader district, really looking site agnostic at this point for the opportunities, and then starting to think about how we get there. So what have other cities done? What are some great case studies on execution of great convention and event districts, as well as sports? So thinking about how that layers in as well. And then what the economic and fiscal impact may be to the community, knowing that this is an economic engine bringing tourism dollars to Milwaukee. So to get into some of the detail, this is just a high-level overview of really some of the key assets, but also some of the new changes with the Landmark Credit Union Live, as well as the soon to be underway Moxie Hotel. So here we just wanted to set the stage for where the Baird Center is situated, the Miller High Life Theater, the UWM Panther Arena, but also what surrounds it. And then some changes that have occurred or potential opportunities, such as looking at the Milwaukee State Office Building, public museum relocation, as well as broader changes in the district. So looking at the district today, we wanted to just summarize here the three key assets, calling out the overall size, when they were improved, key anchor tenants, and some quick notes on capacity, as well as some of the potential challenges with some venues just in need of investment. We met with quite a few folks at the beginning of this study in terms of focus group sessions, understanding where those venues sit today, as well as the community benefit that they both had. So obviously with the Baird Center, the recent expansion, 456 million, opening in 2024 as that key large asset, driving quite a bit of visitation shown here. So we pulled this data using Placer.ai, which is cell phone geofencing technology, showing that significant boost with the Baird Center from 782,000 approximately in 2024 to reporting 1.1 million visits in 2025. That significant jump from the benefit of the larger facility, more modern, being able to accommodate quite a few more events. And then moving forward, looking at the UWM Panther Arena, 590,000 visits in 2025, a significant benefit to the district. We were very pleased to see the number of people that's accommodating, but also providing a value opportunity for local residents to see sporting events. So a great community asset there.
And Matt, what I wanted to add to that, it was interesting as we were doing our data and research and started looking at the attendance at the Panther Arena. We were struck by the fact that we do work in other communities and we're working on assets and things that they might be able to develop to attract visitation. And they would love to have an asset like that exists. And so you really look at that and it's like, well, wait a minute. Something important has already been accomplished. And so that was interesting to us as we went through the process and as we sort of think about broadly across the country about where we're doing work. So, I mean, I'll cheat ahead. I mean, one of the things that we think is worth building upon is that it is a meaningful piece of the district's mission.
And then finally, with the Miller High Life Theaters, steady visitation, reporting 244,100 visits in 2025, with a strong event calendar. So also a strong asset bringing live entertainment and events to the district. And one thing that we find in these districts, which when we get to case studies we'll talk about, is having that steady footfall in these entertainment convention districts is so important. You want your visitors to feel that there's activity and liveliness around events, but also when events are occurring. So really a great story to be told here. So moving forward in terms of the Baird Center lost business, so we collaborated closely with Visit Milwaukee to receive the lost business report. And what you'll notice, I want to call out a few things here. We're in a very competitive convention environment. There's some cities that really have great convention packages. So we are competing in an industry where it's cutthroat and large events are, seeking great destinations for their attendees. A few key things I want to call out on the lost business, which you'll see it goes out to 2030. I was with a meeting planner recently who was booking a large Cancer Society meeting for 2040. So these events book very far into the future. So that future lost business are events that are already on the book somewhere else that we were competing for and lost out on. To call out a few of the core reasons for our lost business, 37% chose another city, which is not shocking. 18% were due to hotel product. whether that be number of rooms, which is a core driving factor in terms of the room block that they're able to hold their event and their attendees in. And then Wisconsin Center District facility constraints, just in terms of size of space, accounting for 11%. And then event canceled or no response, around 20% of that total lost business as well. In terms of our market engagement throughout this study, I mentioned briefly, we met with quite a few local stakeholders and groups, both in person and virtually throughout the study process. So great engagement, and really felt like we covered a lot of bases to understand the local dynamic. We want to make sure that we always are acknowledging that and talking with as many folks as we can throughout the study process. So to cover the market assessment summary, we looked at, like I said at the beginning, the residential market, hospitality, retail, office, and entertainment. There's a lot on the screen here, so I'll just hit a few high-level points for each. For the residential market, there's a significant need for housing in the neighborhood. However, looking at some of the performance data in terms of vacancy, it has slowed slightly in terms of absorption. And in 2022, there was quite a bit of new supply brought online. So in the near term, residential housing in the neighborhood is slightly challenging. However, you'll see in our recommendations for future needs in the neighborhood, there would be significant residential need. In terms of the hospitality market, we pulled a set around the center of competitive properties, which yielded a STAR report of a 62% occupancy and a 171 ADR for the 2024 year. The market is in a situation right now where it is, it's a stable market, but it is not the strongest local market in terms of where occupancy and rates sit. We'll dive more into the details on that, as well as our perspectives on the need for an additional hotel, which we feel can help the hotel market by accommodating larger events and bringing demand here, which a headquarter hotel can do. In terms of the retail restaurant market, we feel there's a strong need for retail in the area. Meeting with the convention planners, as well as others in the neighborhood, there aren't those offerings to grab convenient food and beverage in the neighborhood for convention or event goers, but also people that are in the area. So thinking about retail as a significant need in the district. So moving forward to office, the downtown office market is challenged right now coming off of COVID. We all know the work from home changes that we've seen there. So speculative office is very risky in today's environment. Finally, with entertainment, there is robust supply of live event venues in Milwaukee market. We are going to see a new venue come online shortly at 4,500 capacity. There is that need for a mid-size arena, which the Panther Arena does serve. So we're calling out the importance of that. And then the theater and arena are outdated, as we mentioned, and then having public green space for activations is needed in the neighborhood as well. So to move forward to industry trends around successful convention and event districts, there's really three pillars that we see in this industry: destination appeal, a strong convention center, and the headquarter hotel inventory.
And Matt, just to punctuate that, I think it's important to highlight those three pillars, but they ought to sound and resonate and feel familiar. So if you're responsible for hosting an event for folks, you're going to want them to go to a new modern convention center because you're going to want your event attendees to have a great experience. You're going to want the convention center to have a lot of nice restaurants and retail options and dining in and around the district, because again, it creates for a better environment and a better event. And then likewise, the accommodations, you're going to want to have sort of new, modern, convenient hotels next to the center. So it's really, if you think about it from the event planner's perspective, but B, from the event attendees' perspective, those things feel normal and natural. And those are the kinds of things that folks would want to see in and around the convention center. In different convention centers in different cities are better in some aspects than another, but in general, those objectives apply everywhere.
So talking to some case studies in terms of convention districts, and then we'll get into the competitive environment. To Steve's point, planners really seek destinations that have walkable amenities and attractions, and then the strong supply of large headquarters hotel that create a seamless room block agreements. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but currently there are some large groups here that have to sign quite a few agreements with hotels, which just create some friction and challenges for planners when booking large events. We show some pictures here on the right of some cities that are investing in their convention districts or have invested. Some to call out: the Houston GRV South expansion, adding additional space, but also you can see the exterior public activated space, Kansas City Power and Light, just a broader entertainment district, but a great lively atmosphere that convention goers love. And then Dallas, as well as Philadelphia, with some other examples. And then we wanted to provide a little more detail on entertainment district best practices because of the Deer District here. We looked at the Battery in Atlanta, as well as Gallagher Way in our hometown of Chicago, as well as Titletown in Green Bay.
Apologies for looking at Gallagher. By the way. So anyway,
we wanted to provide these here, especially with what you'll see in the top left is the Coca-Cola Roxy, which is a smaller music venue similar to what Live Nation is doing with the new venue here, which provides over 160 events per year, more footfall to the district, but also having the public activated space to get people there. So part of our recommendation was we have the space outside of the Deer District today, but Steve and I were walking through there on a Tuesday afternoon when there wasn't an event and it wasn't lively. So trying to infuse more quality of life, green space where residents feel they want to go on a Tuesday afternoon when there isn't an event and there's great park space. That is something that we feel the district needs and can pursue. So to summarize, we've put the recipe for successful districts here. I want to call out a few things. Human scale is very important. To talk about the Tuesday we were here, we walked through the Deer District. We ate quickly at the Trade Hotel, and there weren't many folks there, but we went a street over onto 3rd Street, and there was a ton of people out. And they were going into the bars there and park across the street along the river. There was people in the park. So we asked ourselves, why is that? Part of that is the human scale. So people feel that those bars and restaurants are approachable on a Tuesday afternoon. So making sure that that's part of the district when we think about these big, large city blocks and the big assets that are here. So to get into the competitive set, working with Visit Milwaukee, but also we've worked in many of these cities before, as well as looking at the data in terms of size of convention facility. These make up the competitive set that the Wisconsin Center District competes with.
So what do you think? What about smaller cities?
I'd like to wait until.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
So in terms of just calling out for each of these cities, we wanted to provide a few slides on investment in convention facilities. Obviously, we have invested significantly in the center, but Indianapolis is working on an expansion. Detroit, Nashville, Charlotte, and Boston are a few that have either recently invested or are looking to invest in their centers. In terms of headquarter hotel product, we looked at really the past just about a decade or 15 years, 2010 to present, for newer hotel product that is in these markets. So we've summarized that here. I want to call out a few. Columbus recently in 2022 expanded their Hilton to 1,000 rooms. That is a very competitive market to ours, where we lose business to them because of that large 1,000-room hotel. But a few others here, you can see the 612-room Omni in Louisville in 2016. Between when we released this final report and today, Louisville announced they're trying to do another 1,000-room hotel in an old office building that's vacant. So the headquarter hotel industry around these convention centers, we like to say, is almost an arms race, where these cities are trying to invest in headquarter hotel product to house these large, impactful conventions and events. In terms of headquarter hotel product that's under construction, Indianapolis is currently working on the 800-room Signia to open this year, a 600-room JW Marriott in Detroit for 2027, and Cincinnati with a 700-room Marriott. And then one we wanted to call out is New Orleans, which from our perspective is an aspirational competitor to us in terms of size of their center and breakdown, looking to add an 800-room Omni, which would open in 2029. So to summarize, and I know the numbers to the top right are a little bit small for folks, but what we've done here for those competitive environments is tally up the headquarter hotel rooms with these large hotels, and then look at the number of walkable hotels, which we utilized an 1,800 linear foot boundary from the convention center, which is an industry standard for the walkable environment around these centers. And then we also looked at the number of walkable hotel rooms. So there's obviously smaller hotels in these walkable areas, and those are utilized for conventions and events. So folks are staying at the Trade, they're staying at the Spring Hill, which aren't headquarters hotels, but they are influential to the competitive landscape. And then what we did at the end here is provide a walkable rooms per 1,000 square feet of exhibit space. So we know all these centers are different sizes. Indianapolis is a larger center than us. So that's really a size adjustment for the center to look at the number of walkable rooms per 1,000 square feet of exhibit space. So to summarize here, Milwaukee is short from this competitive set by 580 rooms for a headquarter hotel product, but then short 2,400 rooms for walkable hotels. So that, from our perspective, is fairly significant. So when meeting planners are looking at these markets that have significant headquarter hotels, but also quite a few more rooms in the walkable area, it tips the needle towards other cities. So to ask the question, is a new modern headquarters hotel needed? We mentioned the lost business to some of these other markets that are investing heavily. And then meeting with planners in groups throughout the study process, some of our larger groups that are coming here today that drive significant impact to the city, they're doing contracts with over 29 hotels. Which really puts a strain, and some of these groups are at risk of leaving the city, which would be challenging and quite a bit of lost economic impact. Many of these other markets can serve groups of that size in 10 or less hotels. So from our perspective, to summarize the need for a headquarter hotel, we've invested significantly in the center. We've put the stake in the ground that we're a great market for conventions and events. As shown by the 1.1 million visits this past year, which is a significant number to the city in terms of spending and impact. But right now we're space heavy for the center and hotel room light and behind slightly on hotel quality as it relates to headquarters hotel product. One other thing that I want to call out that I think is very important, which these numbers don't necessarily jump off the screen for folks, but we've in this industry, folks have always asked, when a headquarter hotel comes online, does it hurt the market or help the market? So what we've done is we've pulled significant data and information. This is just a high level snapshot, but this has taken many months to pull together. What this is showing is for Charlotte, Indianapolis, Nashville, Columbus, Louisville, Cleveland, Kansas City, and Austin. When these markets added a headquarter hotel, the market actually performed better. It didn't pull business away from the other hotels there. It actually improved the other hotels. These large headquarter hotels induce more demand by providing opportunities for more events, larger events, as well as improving overhead rates. So what we found, I'll hit on these and then Steve jump in. The primary walkable set immediately around the center, there was a 5.8% increase in revenue per available room, which is rate times occupancy. And then for the secondary set, which is the hotels beyond that 1,800 linear feet radius, there was a 6.1% improvement in all of the cities mentioned on average. And this was looking the 3-year average before and the 3-year average after.
And what I was going to, I mean, the simple version. So we were looking for data to help us, to help you all, to help others evaluate the impact of adding a headquarter hotel. So the simple version of the question is, does the addition of a headquarter hotel make the pie larger, or are people just slicing the same size pie more finely? It's a hard question to answer. And so what we want to do is opposed to sort of answering it in an anecdotal way, we look back at data to help inform the decision. So anyway, that's the essential purpose of this slide, is to provide some data and some analysis around what I think is a very important question. So yeah, so just I'm going to summarize, what's here, and you can read some of that. But the general conclusions. I mean, the Baird Center, it's an awesome facility, but I think you all know that. I mean, we have the opportunity to travel, around the country and see other centers. I've had the opportunity to build facilities. This is a nice facility. We do believe that a headquarter hotel is an important piece of allowing the convention center to sort of optimize its ability to generate more business. And so we think that's an important piece of this. We talked about the Panther Arena, and yes, it needs investment, but most assets of that size need investment. So that ought not to surprise anyone. I think that investment generally would fall into two categories. There are those things that you just have to do because a building is old. Those aren't necessarily fun things to do as an owner of an asset. But then I think it would be worth looking at ways to modernize it and to help it optimize itself as a business. And so those are sort of two things to be looked at. The Miller High Life Theater, this is the one that's challenging. It's in a competitive market. And so it's not intuitively obvious what the right next move is. And I think, we'll get into it. And I think that's the crux of some of the hard decisions that you all are faced with. And it's the inevitable sort of business trade-offs. I mean, it's not always the case where everything aligns and you never have to make any hard choices and value judgments. And I think this, just given, if you look at those three assets, that's the one that sort of sits sort of in the spot where you do have to make value judgments. And we're not making those value judgments right now. Those are trade-offs that you all have to make. Those are trade-offs that businesses make every day. Those are trade-offs that homeowners make when they own their house. I mean, it's just inevitable in terms of running a business and developing real estate to figure out how the pros and cons of different assets get found. That's something for you all ultimately to do. So in general, our conclusions that, just given the real estate assets, if you think about the fact that we were looking at this exercise through the lens of what we think makes sense for the long-term business interests of the district, what we think are important factors to consider. One is the new headquarters hotel. We think, there's a case for that, but certainly those are decisions that you all can make. We think that whatever gets done, we think it's important to help create a district around here. And my guess is that's something that most everybody agrees on. When you get down to really developing, it's important to keep that in mind. Matt's point on that earlier slide about what makes for a good district, details matter when things get developed. And I think it's just important to really look and focus on the detail at a very granular level. And so I think you all clearly know that, but I think it's important. I've faced it when you develop real estate, you just constantly want to remind yourself of that. And then, the Panther Arena, we think is an important asset here. And so those are our general conclusions that we've reached. If you look at our recommendations, we broke this into phases. Don't think about phases in the sense that it's on a time frame, but it's really about it's really more about sequencing and what makes sense to start with and what makes sense down the line. And so we certainly think whatever gets done in terms of redeveloping any part of this in any way, shape, or form is adding some additional retail would help. Those are the kinds of things that visitors to the convention center will want to see. That's the kind of activity that guests like. We've stated that we think a 650 key headquarter hotel makes sense. And then, there's the activated public space. And again, that just goes to good urban planning, good placemaking. We just think and frankly, that's one of the things that, I think development trends today generally recognize that. That wasn't always the case when real estate was being developed in sort of different eras. If you sort of look back over a longer arc of developing facilities. And then we think, eventually, if there were an opportunity to add some residential in and around the area would be good. Matt talked about, sort of the vibrancy of businesses. Some of it is not all that complicated. If you're running a restaurant, you want to get a consistent flow of customers. And there's certainly days when people are visiting or there are events, any of the assets here, the adjacent assets, yes, that generates people, but Tuesday morning in February, the business is harder to come by. And so again, that's part of the formula for successful, mixed use districts in general. So some of this thing comes to us looking specifically at the different sites. And so we specifically looked at 3 different sites around the district. And we were looking at these or 6. Did I say 3?
You said 3.
I meant 6.
Yep.
I meant 6. So thank you for catching it. I actually caught this. So we looked at 6 sites around the district. So there are 2. You can see sort of 2 at the on the upper right hand corner. So that's 310 West Wisconsin, the Bellar Phillips Plaza, and then moving around to the other side. There's the Milwaukee State Office Building. There's 623 West State. There's a parking lot there. And then, there's the site of the Miller High Life Theater and the site of the Wisconsin Panther Arena. What we did is we worked with both TDS, who is a planning firm that they were the architect for the Baird Center. They're, highly talented, awesome design firm. And then we also worked with Gilbane to help provide some guidance on sort of general cost. And so what TBS did is they looked at each of the sites. These are not detailed designs for a hotel. It's an initial pass at looking at, given the site constraints and given the program for the hotel, how does the hotel fit on the site? And then that information was given to Gilbane and they looked at it from a cost perspective. And the point was trying to sort of generally see if there are material differences in the cost of a specific site. And again, this is to provide some guidance, some information to help think about what the sort of relative pros and cons are for each of the different sites. So what this is a general scoring matrix, and it's not intended to be this sort of scorecard and whatever's the highest wins. It's intended to highlight the pros and the cons. And I talked previously about striking a balancing act. I mean, it's there are trade-offs, and in developing real estate, there are always trade-offs. And so it's sort of you then this gets to the sort of point of what we were trying to do here is providing you with information to help guide your long-term thinking about a strategic plan for the campus, a strategic approach for the assets. And so I'll talk a little bit about sort of how we looked at this. And so of the six, we looked at it, and one of the things that we looked at was sort of how it connects to the Baird Center. So if what we're building is a headquarters hotel and we want it to be connected, we looked at the general sites, and the reason for these numbers are, the two sites in the upper right-hand corner, those do connect to the public areas of the Baird Center. The Milwaukee State Office Building and the parking lot site are on backside. One site is a little bit further than the other, and the state office building connects at a bad spot. And so can you build them there? Sure. But they've got some, trade-offs and deficiencies, and they're not necessarily connecting in the right place. And it's about thinking about, again, the relative pros and cons of each site. The Miller High Life Theater and the Panther Arena, those easily connect to the public space that's along Kilbourne. And so that's why we thought they had a little bit more benefit. But again, these are trade-offs. Accommodates the target program. And so this really is generally about site size. And so the first four, frankly, are slightly smaller sites. And so what gets constrained a little bit is the ballroom. The hotel tower you can generally fit on the site, but it's because headquarters hotels do have their own ballroom and meeting facilities. And so that was really where those sites were a little bit harder. Can you develop on those sites? Absolutely, yes. You're just making some programmatic trade-offs. And again, in developing real estate, a lot of times it's making a first pass at sort of relative pros and cons of the different conclusions. And then ultimately, a lot of that requires more detail as you sort of drill in and get tighter on the analysis. Supports the creation of a vibrant district. If you look at sort of how those are sort of ranked, and to give you the logic behind what we were doing, we think it's reasonable, but certainly people may think differently. But we were looking at the district as a whole. So you've got the Baird Center generally at one end, and the other large anchor is the 5-serve Forum. And so we sort of viewed this as adding activity, a hotel, people to the middle of those two anchors is probably more beneficial. And again, these are not hard and fast. These are sort of judgments about, sort of, is it better in the middle or at end? And that frankly is all that was about. The two in the middle, the state office building and the parking lot site, those are on, I'm going to call it the backside. And so again, you just sort of think, not even with the site, if you have a sort of generic site, where would you want to put these kinds of things? That was what was behind that. Historic impacts. And I will tell you this, I honestly, this is hard because, and when I say it's hard, there are inevitable trade-offs. And so the first four sites have no impact on the historic buildings. And the other two, if one of those were going to be developed, absolutely positively has an impact on those. And those are value trade-offs that you all need to make and a community needs to make. And I actually think it's hard. I mean, it's hard. I've developed real estate where historic assets have been involved, and it is not easy. And it's really, in my mind, and this is just me talking personally, it's really about how a community values an asset. And that's not something that somebody from outside the community can say. That really is something that it's a question for you all. And keeping or not keeping a site has implications. It's not that something is just right, wrong. It's about the trade-offs. And that's what we've tried to outline in the scoring matrix are the business and real estate trade-offs that would need to be made. And then the other thing we looked at was the relative cost of construction. And so, generally you can kind of look at how the sites were ranked, the two larger sites. So that's the Highlight Theater in the Panther Arena. They're larger sites. It just will facilitate an easier construction process, and you can design the building in such a way that it's more efficient than it might be on the other sites. And again, those are relative trade-offs. So that's it. And then what we have next on here is, renderings. It picked one site. We're not saying that's the solution. I know, and here, I know that's a source of concern and consternation and challenge. I mean, I'm flat out not going to deny that. There be renderings done for any of the other sites. This gets into the value trade-offs. I think what this does is it highlights and underscores the challenge of one of the possible paths. And again, we're not saying that you should absolutely positively do this. This is just, if this was the route you chose, that this is what that could look like.
Just a question to the chair. Does it seem a little premature that we're talking about renderings when you started up the meeting, talking about the kind of 4 guiding principles and talking about, do we need a convention hotel and who should be the catalyst if we do, and now a lot of information has been presented that we have.
I think for me, it's their presentation, it's the product that they put together. And I think the purpose of this meeting is to hear that, and we can ask questions. I hear what you're saying. But I think, I think this is our one opportunity here, right? And so I think we'll take it for what it is, and we still have a lot of work to do.
And I'll just make a comment on renderings. I will tell you, so frequently in our work, we include renderings, and I get that this one causes consternation. That one of the things we've found is that, like, people look at numbers and read words, and not all that interesting. People react to renderings, and so I think they highlight what's being talked about. I've worked on projects where we've gotten lots of renderings from different architects about what's going to happen, and it's really just a way to understand what something might mean. And again, it helps folks look at it, and frankly, it's producing renderings today is not anywhere near as complicated as it was when I started in the business.
Then you could have shown renderings for all the
Okay.
other sites too.
Let's keep it moving.
Yes.
I recognize my
Yes.
my
This
question was
appeared
not
to
about
pre-select.
renderings.
But
It was about the utility of this conversation.
yeah, and let me focus on it. I don't know. Well, I think the renderings add value. I absolutely agree there could be renderings done for the other sites. I absolutely agree with it. What I hope doesn't happen is I hope that an illustrative rendering, and this isn't a building design. I mean, they drew something off of some boxes.
We can just continue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and just this basically we're almost at the end. So just Matt, skip ahead to the economic or the impact overview, and I'm even gonna skip through this. Just do the impacts. And so the 30-year impacts, this, and this is site agnostic. So these numbers, it's about $2.5 billion in total spending over the 30-year time period. Total net new earnings of $731 million, and a little over $100 million in total new tax revenue. So that's the end of the presentation. There's a whole lot more data that backs this up if folks have questions, but this generally is the highlight, the highlights of the presentation. And I do want to emphasize that the whole point of this exercise is to provide a framework of research to help you all put a strategy in place. And so, I just happy to answer questions and talk about anything you all want to talk about.
Great. Thank you so much. I feel like it was really nice to have your perspective on this report instead of just reading it and trying to process it myself. So thank you. Before we open it up for questions, I did just want to let you all know that in your packet, you can find a sheet that has what I would like to use as our guiding principles and questions. So when you're thinking about questions that you want to ask, if you can please just refer to this and determine whether or not you feel that that's going to help us work that we're doing. I would also like to start with questions from the committee. And I would ask that anyone who would like to ask a question, if you could just raise your hand and then I will recognize you. I would like to avoid talking over each other. So with that, question.
I'm not on the committee. I just wanted to sit here and listen.
Yes, thank you for attending. Oh, and I also did want to mention that if you could note that Bill Randall at 8:40, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start it.
Okay, Alderman Baum.
Regarding I'll tell you, reading this over, it seemed to me that your thumb was on the scale. You're clearly pushing in favor of the removal. No question. Renderings show that. I might add the renderings show a skywalk, which will never be built across Kilbourne. Just so your future planning, that will not happen.
Okay.
City will not support it. I, as the local alderman, will not support
Alderman Bauman, we have a lot of work to do and make decisions, and we will investigate.
But that's an assumption that's being made here. And I assume that's what you mean by connect to Baird Center with Skywalk scoring matrix. Because Belphillis Plaza is equally connected. It did at one point.
What was intended there was how and where it connected, and whether they're having a weather protected connection set aside where it is better than not having. I agree. And then the question gets to be, do you connect over or do you connect under?
Right.
Those are two ways to do it, or the alternative is you connect at grade. You can't do that in a weather connected way. So I view those things, that is not, in our minds, that was not what was driving that decision. It's about sort of where it was connected. It wasn't about necessarily the how.
And the 310 West Wisconsin site, that is a existing privately owned office building. I mean, are you planning to use that building as is and convert it to a hotel, or demolish and build new? Because that's an occupied site with an active building that, to my knowledge, is not for sale and not going away anytime soon.
That was one of the sites we were asked to take a look at.
By whom?
I think
That might have come from me years ago, Bob,
Years ago.
when they were, it does lend itself.
As is. So in other words, the plan, the concept was to use that building.
Yeah. You
Okay.
cut out the middle.
Just so that was clear, because I noticed that was your lowest construction cost. And
no, that was
The higher.
that was the highest construction. Yeah, so a higher number is in that scoring matrix. It's counterintuitive on construction costs, but the higher number is the better cost, i.e. lower.
Right. And regarding the Miller Theater, one of your underlying assumptions for it being expendable is that it will compete with the Live Nation venue. And our experts in the city take strong issue with that assertion. They argue that the Live Nation venue as a flat floor venue, standing room venue, essentially does not compete with the Miller Theater, which is a 4,000 seated venue, and that it's books totally different types of acts, totally different types of performers, and that they will not compete much with one another. So, I mean, how do you respond to that? I mean, we got a memo to that. Letter was sent around by the Pabst Theater Group, which directly.
So let me address sort of two things. So I hear you saying that you feel like we have our thumb on the scale. I apologize if that's the perception, and I get with the rendering. I absolutely get where you would conclude that, but we don't. We think of the three assets, that's the one that is the most competitively challenged in terms of the market that it exists in as a business. And so there are value trade-offs to be there. If you look at our conclusions, we didn't say demolish theater. We didn't. That is a conclusion that you all could reach. You can keep it, but there are other value trade-offs that have to be made. And so again, I want to emphasize, and I mean, I do genuinely apologize if that was the perception from this, but that was not the intent. The intent of this is to put together a framework. So the things that we did say and we concluded was, you know, we do believe you need a headquarters hotel. There were 6 sites that we looked at. I don't know if there are more. I don't think there are more, but there are 6.
Well, yeah, there is more. I mean, there's one on the southwest corner of 6th and Wells, which is a vacant lot.
So
Versus across the street.
So this was in the fundamental point of this is strategically, from a strategic perspective, is a headquarters hotel needed? So the one thing we did say is we do think that is the case. Then it gets into the question of where is the right site? Some of the metrics to look at are how it impacts the district, how much it's going to cost. To your point about the office building, I will tell you, I'm going to state something that everybody knows. It's easier to develop real estate on land that you already control. It just is. And so each of these sites have different complicating factors. So what we were trying to do is evaluate them at a high level first pass. And then the other sort of recommendation that we made or conclusion we came to is the Panther Arena is an awesome asset. It helps the district. It generates people. It has local visitation. Does it need more money to have it be viable? Yes. Could you spend more money in it to even make it a stronger business case? Sure. So those kinds of things, again, can help shape the sort of long-term strategy. Then we talked about doing things that improve the district in general. I think the hardest decision in all this is the theater. I do. And I think that's something that frankly is, and this is just me talking, I mean, I think that's the hardest part about all of this is a challenge. And it's just evaluating the pros and cons of its value to the community. And I sort of get and understand your point about the marketing of it. It's still in a competitive business environment. And I'm not challenging anything that's been said. I'm just sort of, we were looking at this at a macro level and trying to frame up data and information to allow you all to make the right long-term strategic moves. And the challenge, frankly, in doing a lot of this is districts, urban districts take time to develop. And I'm not talking, years. Sometimes it gets measured in decades, but decisions that get made early, that's why sort of having a long-term strategic plan makes sense. Markets move and change. And so even on the hotel side, you're projecting what the market dynamics are today at a point in time. the reality is, if a hotel were to be built on any of those sites, it's targeting into a market that frankly is down the road, and that's part of the art of real estate development. And so I just want to emphasize it, sort of where we are related theater. And so it's,
So you're recommending, we need a headquarters hotel, you're agnostic as to.
we believe we are agnostic as to location. We think it's important to get one. Then it becomes a matter of the value trade-offs as to what the right site is. And
But wouldn't a vacant lot be more desirable than a built site? Or-
Alderman Bauman.
Good.
Alderman Bauman, I will just say that that is actually like part of our work, right? That we're gonna be doing.
Okay, I'm just saying as a matter of general real estate principles and a vacant site that's owned by the city, which would be an easy partner. Work with the Wisconsin
it
Center
would,
District.
and that certainly makes ownership and control matter. Then if you look at the other principles that we looked at, so how proximate is it? How well does it connect into the hotel, or how well does it connect into the Baird Center? Is the site big enough to accommodate the hotel? There are all of those trade-offs, but step one, the threshold question is, is one needed or not? Then after that question, it's where is the right place to put it? And the scoring matrix that we put out, folks, other sites could be evaluated. This is what we were sort of charged to look at. We can absolutely look at other sites, but I do think the matrix that we put together is a fair way to look at it. There are certainly other factors that could look at it. I mean, to your point about site control and ownership, that to me, broadly speaking, falls into the cost category, because if land cost is zero, it makes construction cost. It's the only sort of piece you have to deal with. If you have to add in acquisition costs, that becomes a different issue. So I don't dispute any of that. This is all of the details of it.
And you provided some very nice pictures of other headquarter hotels in other cities. What was missing was how were those financed? Those all financed through the convention districts?
So that's
They
also
finance-
something that we're gonna discuss because you're on here. So
Well,
we
but
will
they're
discuss
expert.
that.
Like,
It's not up to them to determine how they're gonna be.
not how, well, it's a historical fact. How in fact was the new hotel in Indianapolis? For example, I mean, that would be very interesting.
Generally, and Matt, help me because you know some of the details better, but generally speaking, convention center headquarters hotel do have public support. They just do.
But that can come in many forms.
Correct.
It can be the existing bonding authority of the Wisconsin Center District, or it can be assistance from the other municipalities.
Absolutely, yes. We've not made that. That is something that and we do a lot of that, but that's sort of at a later step in the process because so it's helpful to know the approach. It's also helpful to know the cost because the two things kind of line up. And it's all this is, I'm going to simplify it for myself, is that it's a math equation. Something costs a certain amount of money. The hotel is an asset that's going to generate commercial revenue. And then that amount of money either does or doesn't support the cost of the hotel. In a convention headquarters hotel, the answer is invariably no, it doesn't. So then there's a feasibility gap, and that ranges from market to market. And then it's a matter of looking at, right, which is why the economic impact analysis slide helps, but it's then looking at what the different public sector funding tools are.
All right, that's the most interesting part of this. Frankly, I mean, that's the one thing that was missing.
Well, but that's not, so we weren't charged in terms of this exercise right here, the highest and best use analysis of looking into that. We do that frequently. And so I agree with you. That's sort of interesting because at the end of the day, the district that has a convention center asset that decides it wants to do a hotel That's an important part of, can it get done?
Because we've had an RFP on the street for what, a decade now for Belfield's Plaza? I mean, you want to submit for a hotel there tomorrow, you can do it.
Okay.
I mean, the headquarters.
I think that's definitely something that's something that we can consider in our work in the future. I think we should move on to another committee member, Mr. Crosby.
Yeah, just let me ask a quick question, Steve.
Yeah.
Because like when I look at this chart right here, net new impact, and to me, that's almost under the category of you build it, they will come, so to speak. So I do believe we had a new convention hotel, it would generate some business. But going back to the fundamental question of whether or not we need it, when you look on your slide 12, you say the Visit Milwaukee shared information that the Baird Center has lost business revenue about $300,000 annually. Then you say, or they said, that of that, only 18% is due to the current hotel supply. So in my mind, that kind of equates to about 59 or so $1,000 annually lost business, specifically attributable to hotel inventory. So trying to figure out whether or not the squeeze is worth the juice. Are we building this to get an incremental $60,000 a year?
So what I would say to that is, I mean, the 37% chose another city. So when we look at the competitive environment of the other cities in terms of the hotel product that they have and their centers, we have a phenomenal center here. That chose another city is a criteria that Visit Milwaukee has on their response. So that's what they indicate when they lose an event. So if the factors are destination, but also hotel product, if they chose another city because they felt they could only do, 4 hotel contracts instead of 15, that may be under that category. So I think focusing solely in on the 18% is a little bit of a misrepresentation.
Well, when I look at the 37%, I chose another city. It's such a large category. It could be weather, it could be so many other things, but they have a specific category for hotels.
Yeah, so, and I will tell you, some of that, and you ask a fair question, it sort of gets at the data that was available, but it really causes someone to want to do is to say, okay, of the 30%, well, why really? Why was it? And to drill down in that information. But this was what we had available to us in terms of metrics. The question you're asking is, an interesting, fair question.
What we know anecdotally, especially with groups that say choose Columbus, a huge driving factor for choosing Columbus when we met with groups was they have the 1,000-room unit. So those are some of the things that led us down the direction.
The other piece of information to me that's sort of striking is the number of hotels that it can take to put together sort of large event. And the other piece of this is, for better or worse, it's a competitive environment. You guys are in convention center business, and those businesses aren't static. They change over time. And in some respects, you sort of look at the slides of what the other cities are doing. And they're bad sports analogies, but it's like being in the wrong division in NFL. You need to kind of understand what your competitors are doing so you can compete.
Well, speaking of that, Steve and Matthew, just a follow-up question to that. You talk about the combination of the hotel and this attraction space, whether it be, you talked about the KC Power and Light, the Reading Terminal. So what do you think is the biggest catalyst? Is it the hotel? Is it the attraction space? If you do one, does it mean you have to do both for it to be effective?
I'll use Indianapolis as a case study. They have hung their hat on being a convention event destination. They've invested significantly, as shown in hotel product. People aren't jumping out of their seats to go there because they have a great entertainment district. They go there because it's easy and seamless to hold large events. Why they have the NFL Combine, they have connection to Lucas Oil Stadium. But a huge factor from our perspective is, one, the center. At the end of the day, you have a number of people that are coming for a show. So you need to have the space inside the center that can hold them. And then you need the beds at night for them to put their head. Those are the two factors that are really the factors that drive it. Meet with meeting planners, it's hotels, can I fit in the building?
You think the attraction is more like the icing?
Yep. Yeah.
And if you look at, I mean, Las Vegas is one of the best convention markets in the country. The amount of hotel rooms in the center are the main two things, but then obviously the icing on the cake is it's Vegas.
I did just also want to point out that I'm trying to organize a presentation from Visit Milwaukee and then also the sales and marketing team from Wisconsin Center District. So hopefully they'll also be able to help us sort of like dive into this information more as well. Mayor McBride?
Yeah, and a couple of comments and then a question. First of all, I do appreciate your report. I think substance in here. I worked for 24 years at the 310 building. So I saw this building, I saw the first iteration get built, all the pilings being driven and all that kept me from doing my work for 2 years. And I lived professionally in this neighborhood for a very long time. What I said to you when you came for our listening sessions or focus groups is it's dead around here. This is a dead neighborhood. Buildings are too big for human beings. All the big buildings are in one place. No retail, there's no greenery, all the rest of it. So all that I completely agree with. My initial question on that is, if we didn't build a headquarters hotel, I believe we should build it. Listen to everybody else too. If we didn't do that, if we couldn't do that, I have the same question to Alderman Bauman does. Where are we getting the money? But that's for later. If we didn't do that, would it be enough to provide a lot more retail and to green it up and to make it a little bit more human? How much of a difference would that make?
I think some of it is a little bit the chicken and the egg. And so I think you need the things that are going to generate more people on an event basis, then follow up with the residential. And I think then the retail follows. It's hard. Just lease. I'm going to state something that everyone knows intuitively. It's just hard. If someone's going to lease a restaurant space, all they really care about are what their gross sales are going to be. And it's just going to look at the number of people that are going to come into their place. And you can have a place every place has slow times. They just do. That works if the high times are just so strong that you can carry yourself. But
It's Christmas time versus the rest of the year.
Yeah. And so the trick is, though, having consistent volume just makes it easier to run a business because you can staff it better and all of that. So I think and things follow. And if you look at sort of strategies, I'll use, these aren't direct analogies, but the old model of shopping centers, which is you build the anchors. And so people are going to go to the anchor and then they go to the other stores. The same applies to, grocery anchored shopping centers get developed. Grocery store place pays next to nothing. And then all the other tenants around it are doing it. So I think in this instance, in this context, the anchors tend to be the assets. And so the connection is, in order to increase the value of the convention center, the hotel becomes a piece of it because that's what the competitive market is. And the competitive market in that instance is the other different cities. And so you're using the anchor assets that you have to help drive the other. So it's this sort of cycle. It's sort of a self-reinforcing cycle, but you still need to, I think, put a stake in the ground. And you guys have a huge stake in the ground, which is the convention center. You can't just build a hotel with no convention center to go to. So you are approaching this, from our perspective, in a really sound, rational, deliberate fashion. Unfortunately, owning assets means you have to think about them forever. You just don't build it and say, great, I'm done. And you know, ride off into the sunset. So I do think, you know, to answer your question, I think you need things that are going to draw more here, and then the other activities.
So in other words, the greenery and the retail would be.
I don't think that would try. I mean, I think they're going to suffer from the same challenges they suffer. Suffer is not the right word, but yeah, I think you need.
Other thing is, born and raised here and back, but I spent a lot of my life in New York City and Boston, lesser extent DC and Miami. So I've tried to look at my hometown from the outsider's perspective. Maybe this isn't the question for you, maybe it's for Visit Milwaukee. But did you consider at all challenges we face in reputation as part of that? We've got all these cool places like Boston, Nashville, and all that are supposed to be our competitors. Are we cool enough for that, or is a hotel going to solve that? We're very cool in February.
So I'll say there's some competitors in there that are cool. Their buildings are similar size to you all. So the groups that are looking for a size like this, you all are competing with them. But the Columbus and Cincinnati and Cleveland and Detroits of the world aren't that cool. So I would say these groups are looking for two things. One, they move around the country, so they like to be in new locations. And two, you all have a beautiful new building. In terms of feedback that you all have received from events that have been held here, this is one of the nicest convention centers of this size now in the industry. We're hearing that from planners. So I think when you think about large conventions, there's two things that they're looking to. It's building and hotel product, but also I would argue from an outsider's perspective, I grew up in Southern California and now live in Chicago. Milwaukee's a cool city. I mean,
I was going to ask whether Chicago thought Milwaukee.
but the brewery scene, the major league teams, I mean, how the Bucks have done, the Deer District, you all are not seen as Cleveland, like other potential cities. So I would argue from an outsider's perspective and what you're hearing from the responses to the building, strong contender.
There's a meeting still going on.
Maybe.
Thanks, Mayor.
Can I ask a question?
I mean, let me ask Gerard if he has a question first. All right.
So you spoke of the vibrancy, right? A number of times of the area and of the district and how having, but I guess the question I would have is how does tearing down an asset contribute to that vibrancy of what we already have, given the fact that there are slow times, given the fact that there may not be conventions coming in February. We have these assets that can contribute to that vibrancy as we look at them. I'm just curious as about that aspect of specifically to the Highlight Theater and to the Panther Arena that you stated were in the consideration.
I'm not quite sure how to answer it other than you have to sort of look at each on a case by case basis. And this is part of, you know, doing master planning, strategic planning for a community. You look at the different alternatives and I'm talking about how I, through the course of my career, have gone through like the design process on things, and I translate it to design because ultimately when you're dealing with real estate business strategy, generally translates itself into two things. One is the built asset and the other one is how it operates. But I think it's looking at a couple of different alternatives. So it's taking some alternatives, narrowing down, then looking at each and trying to make each, you sort of step aside and say, I don't, you know, yeah, I may have a favorite, I may have a hypothesis, which I think is the best, but taking each alternative, trying to make it the best alternative that it can be, and then sort of compare all those and see what you end up with. I mean, there's a piece of this that's, and this is, I think, the same with developing district. There's a piece of it that's data driven, there's a piece of it that's a little bit of art and judgment, and it's balancing. Great places are sort of the mix of that. I know I didn't necessarily answer it, other than to say, I think you just need to go through the process to firmly look at each alternative. And then to me, you will sit there and say, okay, here's option A. It's ABC, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Here's option B or 2, or however I sort of frame that up. And it has these metrics. What are the pros? What are the cons? And it's going to be about the different factors that you're looking at. So things like historical asset, what does it mean to the district? What does it do to the convention center? How much does it cost? How is it going to be funded? And it's figuring out what those different strategic choices would yield and sort of planning those out. And that to me is the only way I can think of how to sort of go through the process.
I just want to add one
Yeah.
thing to that. The theater adds a ton of vibrancy and footfall. I mean, if we look at, 244,000, now this is from Placer geofencing, so there may be some, it's not going to align directly with attendance. But that is significant. All of these districts, we work on some where it's a greenfield site. Someone says, we want to build an entertainment district. What should go here? Well, you need the event drivers that are bringing events there. I mean, if you look at the Battery example, it does 160 shows. This new landmark venue will do probably comparable. I don't know what Live Nation's saying, but probably 120 to, that's going to be a lot of activity on nights. The venue here does quite a bit of activity. So if you're starting with a blank slate, you want an entertainment district, event drivers, you also need, for the retail piece that Steve was mentioning, you need the households there, you need the rooftops. So like the district we sit in today is largely fully event driven. That's why our Tuesday night was fairly slow, because there was no event. So I think they all contribute to the vibrancy. It comes down to, the facility is going to need investment to stay competitive in the environment. So
I'm going to make this is a very general comment about sort of projects in general, and think about the word project however you want. The ones that I've seen throughout my career that are the most successful started with a lot of really hard, sometimes diametrically opposed items, and sometimes it just takes some hard work to go through it. And I think deliberately going through the process a lot of times yields an outcome that you didn't realize going in. And developing districts, and I think you all are at a great spot because there's some good building blocks here already. Can it be better? Sure. But we've seen places where you look at it, it's like, oh, wow, I'm having a hard time seeing how to go from point A to point B. It does take time, and it does take hard work.
Yeah, just real quick, on the Miller Theater. So it is right now a revenue generating. And according to the information we provided, in terms of capital improvements over the next 20 years, about $18.5 million expected to be expended for modernization. I don't know if that's impacted by its historical designation because some of the code requirements may be relaxed or totally, kind of not even needed because of its designation. So I guess I'm wondering, what I didn't see was whether or not, if we were to give up that site, how long or what would be the expectation for the center district of replacing revenue generated by that asset over the foreseeable future. At some point, let's say that was the site, it becomes a convention hotel. And I guess this also depends on how you finance it as well. But I just have a hard time figuring out how we replace that revenue generation.
can I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's tied to the it's tied to the piece of, okay, if you're just looking at operational revenue, or are you looking at the broader picture of tax revenue to the city that is above what is generated today? So I think the operational piece is tied to how it's financed and how that is structured. I will tell you a good example is we showed Houston up here. Houston has what's called Houston First, which is the group similar to here, Wisconsin Center District, that manages the center, but they also own the 1,400 room Hilton there. They run that. It performs very well, and that is a cash cow for their organization. So I'll tell you that, and again, very different situation, but that is a significant revenue driver for the organization at 1,400 rooms. And again, they're paying off bonds from it. They're looking to do another hotel that they would actually own. The organization Houston First would. So I think as it relates to revenue, there's the operational revenue tied to the financing, but then there's the fiscal and spending piece and jobs impact that I think is above the baseline today that a large asset like that. And really the end slide, the economic impact, is the return on investment to the city. Why would you invest dollars in a convention center or a convention hotel? It's to reap the rewards of the spending that would occur but for the project.
And just to add, I mean, that was an awesome answer. I was just going to add the sort of simplified version of it is the quick answer is I'm not sure how to answer the question because we don't have all the information, but there are sort of two lenses through which you can look at it. So is it being looked at through the P&L, Wisconsin Center District, or is it being looked at for its broader impacts on the community? And that's one of the sort of the challenge in the business of a convention center district or an authority is being able to shift between those two things. And that fundamentally at the beginning, we talked about the sort of purpose and mission of an entity, and the purpose and mission of most every convention center authority is broader, just given its sort of mandate, what it means for the community.
Just say one thing.
Yeah.
Not on the committee. I just came here to say, you know what the cost of a new hotel is right now? I just priced one out. $493,000.
So
That's how you cost.
Well, I asked around too. We're talking 400 to 500.
Yeah, so.
Well, I think
Impossible.
I think that kind of information is incredibly helpful for the work.
Yeah,
Right.
and the other thing is, we're running an occupancy 10 points. So I'm not here to say anything. I'll say it for you all probably. But one estimated didn't tell us anything new we know about our city.
Yeah, that's
Things here. And how can you? You come in, you fly in, you fly out, you read a bunch of stuff. I found 200 hotels. Because the Aloft is in walking. And the brew house. So we don't need 200 more.
I found 2 green spaces. You know, your map, you don't have the Peck Pavilion circled, which is adjacent to Milwaukee's, Marcus Performing Arts Center, and the park that you talked about. You guys went to Piermont Canton Park. Basically,
Yeah, again, all helpful, I think, for the work that we're gonna be doing here.
just we're unfortunately, we're highly cognizant of the cost of hotel, working in some other markets. And
Right. It's like, I want to take a flight to LA, not go to the moon.
Oh, I mean,
Isn't that the
these
same?
aren't easy projects.
Mhm.
Like, this isn't to say a magic wand is going, they're very hard projects. Construction costs are high, interest rates are high, and they're complex to finance. They're not, it doesn't, one thing I wanted to say is every municipality and jurisdiction is different related to tools they have to finance convention facilities. Some markets have financing tools that they've put in place to do so, and others don't, and that may make a project not work or work.
And if I could,
Mhm.
you might step up your proofreaders a little bit because page 48,
Okay.
education list.
Stop.
I mean, you got University of Whitewater in North.
All right.
We've already fixed that. We'll call out that we have a typo on that page. It's already been
A
changed.
lot of typos, actually, but that's
Well,
okay.
I don't know how they relate to the work that we're
Well,
doing.
it does relate. If the
anyways,
basic
what
facts
I-
are wrong,
I-
question
Doesn't discount the work.
Just to wrap it up, if there are no other questions from the committee or outside committee members, just a couple of things that I would like to request, if possible from you that I think would help us is just to know what some of the funding programs were that were used to develop the other areas in
Sure.
comparison cities. That I think would be very valuable to
no, we-
us,
we-
especially if there are creative financing options. That's something that I think, maybe that's something that
Yeah,
we could
no,
make happen, given
we-
the expense of something like
Yeah,
this.
we can provide that because I do acknowledge that
It's impossible.
there,
And Austin, take Austin right now, they're running a 50% occupancy, 1,000 room hotel. They don't have a convention. And
So, it sounds very stressful to be in the hotel business. My other thing is,
It is.
the other,
Look
thing that I would
Look
like to
at me.
request is to know how many hotels are directly connected to convention centers, particularly in these communities. So those are the two takeaways that I had. I don't know if there's any information that any of the other committee members would like to request that we can use in our future work. If not, I guess, do I need to entertain a motion to
You do.
adjourn? And then, on the, there's also the dates for the next meeting. Although, like I said, I am trying to arrange a meeting with, some outside stakeholders before our next meeting. Gentlemen. But as of right now, our next meeting is Thursday, March 12th at 1 p.m. And I look forward to, seeing you all there. Ryan, did you have a comment?
all I was say was thank you for allowing us an opportunity for the discussion, and we would be more than happy to come back if you wanted to have further discussion, or if there's additional information you want, we're happy to continue to help here.
Thank you.
That's our goal, and our charge is to provide you with right information to help you make sort of the best decision.
What is this?
To be honest, it's something incredibly distracting that I don't
I'm
quite
very
understand
calm.
why it's being distributed at this current time. If
Can-
maybe it's this or Mr. Yingling can tell us what it
I
is.
think it's very useful.
Mr. Yingling, would you like to tell us what's being placed in front of everybody?
Yeah, this was, requested by Gary Witt. Wanted to get this before everybody.
Okay, I just wanted to be
Yeah.
noted that I did not request for this to be
No, you
distributed at this committee. So, thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Second? Wonderful. Thank you all so much. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice Friday. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.